Mock draft season means all sorts of projected trades for the Chicago Bears. So we'll take a look at where they could go if they wanted to move up or what they could get if they move down.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. On the show today, all things NFL draft trades, specifically with these Chicago Bears 2 second-round picks. We'll take a look back at recent NFL draft trade history, sort of in combination with the projected NFL draft trade chart value, and kind of combine and figure out, okay, if the Bears wanted to move up from their second-round picks to try and get a prospect earlier in this draft, maybe even back into the first round, what type of compensation would that take, and how could that affect the Chicago Bears draft plans? We'll also then look at, okay, well, if they get to their picks in the second round and they want to move down, what type of compensation could they get depending on how far they want to move down? And there seems to be a couple of different sort of tiers of like, okay, if you move this far, you're more likely to get this. If you move a little farther, you can get a little bit more. And we'll kind of break down what might be a good range for what the Bears could be looking for if they're in the market to move down. We'll kind of wrap up looking at, okay, what might Ryan Poles' strategy be? What should Ryan Poles' strategy be? You know, what kind of approach should he take to this NFL draft in terms of that these dueling needs of like, Bears need to add good young players. They also need to add a lot of good young players in this quality versus quantity debate when it comes to the Chicago Bears in this upcoming draft. We know the Bears don't have a first-round pick this year. Of course, traded for Justin Fields last year, but then traded Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers to get a second-round pick this season. The Bears also don't have a fourth-round pick this season from previous NFL draft trades as well. They don't have a seventh either, but they do have an extra sixth, which I believe is what they got from the Anthony Miller trade to the Houston Texans. So as of now, the Chicago Bears have 39 and 48 in the second round. Then in the third round, it's number 71. In the fifth round, it's 148 and 150. And then in the sixth round, it's 168. 6 draft picks as of now for the Chicago Bears in this upcoming NFL draft. And it's fun when you see the mock draft simulators. I mean, our friends at the Draft Network have them. PFF has one. I think Pro Football Network has one too, where you can put in trades and trade up for specific prospects. A lot of times you'll see it go for, you know, that wide receiver that you just want to go up and get, or, you know, that offensive lineman that's fallen, or even a defensive back. I've seen some of those. And given that the Bears have 2 second-round picks, you do have some leverage there. You have an extra 5th-round pick as well that could be used to potentially move up. It all just sort of depends on exactly how far you do want to move up. Looking back at the last few drafts, we saw this past season, the Broncos went from 35, the Falcons, the Broncos went from 40 to 35. The teams are not important. It's the slots of where they go. To go from 40 to 35, the Broncos gave up a 4th-round pick to move up 5 spots, but then also got a 6th-round pick back. Or you saw the Raiders go from 48, where the Bears also pick, up to 43, just 5 slots there, also giving up a 4th-round pick. Last year, that seemed to be the going rate to move up about 5 slots. Was you're packaging a 4th-round pick with your lower 2nd-round pick to move up those 5 spots and getting a later day 3 draft pick in return. Chicago Bears don't have a 4th-round pick as of now, so maybe they would have to do 2 5s or a 5 and a 6, or maybe a future draft pick in there if that was the type of range they might be looking to go up. But if they were trying to jump, into the first round, for example, move from 39 somewhere up there in the first round, certainly you could potentially try and package those 2 second-round picks, 39 and 48. We haven't really seen over the last few seasons. I dug back to, I think, about 2016 is where I stopped looking through all the draft trades from draft day. We haven't seen a team package 2 picks in this range together to move. We haven't seen a team trade down out of the first round to 2 picks, like 2 second-round picks like this in that range to have a direct comparison. But when you look at like the NFL draft trade charts, it seems to put the Bears, right around that mid to lower 20s. It might be as high as you could potentially go. As with all NFL draft trades, you have to have a team that's willing to go down that far and willing to take 2 second-round picks as compensation as opposed to something else. Leverage can be different, and looking at historical trades isn't always an accurate representation of what the market is going to be this year. Because, for example, in 2020, there was a team that moved up from 37, so 2 spots earlier than where the Bears pick right now. Bears are at 39, but from 37 to 23, they gave up the second and a third, the 37 and their third-round pick to jump all the way up to 23. So presumably, similar compensation, the Bears could give up 39 and 71 to get up to 23. That seems a little bit, I don't know, that doesn't seem like as much compensation as I might expect to move that far. It would seem to me like it might cost you a little bit more to go up a little bit higher than that. Because like the year before that, 2019, a team moved from 46 to 26, and they gave up a future second-round pick. So it was their current second-round pick and their future second-round pick to go up to 26 to get whatever player they wanted to. So it was sort of like 2 second-round picks, but one was a year in the future, which in trade compensation terms tends to be lower valued than a present pick in that same round. So it does seem to be like at least a minimum of a third or a future second to get into that first round with, if you're going to package that with the Bears' early round draft pick, to go get that wide receiver that you want, that offensive lineman, that defensive back, whatever player it is that you really feel like is that can't-miss player that you just have to be a true difference maker on your team in a season when you wouldn't have a first-round pick. And you know that you have that potentially that other second-round pick there from the Chargers to fall back on if you move up with one of your second-round picks to still be able to get 2 top 50 draft picks there that can be potentially more immediate impact players. Bears could also look at it the other way and feel like, no, they also just need quantity in addition to quality, and maybe trading down could be a way for Ryan Poles to recoup some other draft picks, whether it be early or later rounds. I mean, depending on how far you want to move down, you tend to have a different variety of the types of compensation you're going to get in exchange. So we'll take a look at, okay, what would it be if the Bears moved down a few slots versus, a dozen slots, and how you could potentially recoup a third-round pick or multiple late-round picks next on Locked On Bears. I'm excited about this new sponsor with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. They're called Shady Rays. And Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. And some really fashionable designs too. Some cool, trendy, modern-looking sunglasses. I was looking through their site. They have a lot of really cool stuff. Also, something you won't find anywhere else, Shady Rays has an insane protection program. It includes complete lost or broken protection on every pair. If you lose your sunglasses, no matter what happens, they will send you a brand new pair. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, every Shady Rays sunglasses you purchase, they donate 10 meals to fight hunger in America. Exclusively for Locked On Bears listeners, you can head to shadyrays.com and use our promo code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses. And they're backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. As we look at where the Bears could go in this NFL draft, it seems like we've gotten some indications of Ryan Poles really particularly valuing draft picks and maybe hinting at wanting to acquire some more throughout the course of this draft. That doesn't necessarily mean He's going to do it by trading down in the second round. You could certainly trade down in the third, or when you have the 2/5 there, you could trade down from one of those and get 6th and 7th or potential future draft picks. But of course, today we're only focusing on that second round because we're not going to take a whole podcast to talk about trading day 3 draft picks and where you could go in the 5th round. Like, who cares? But we do care about those second round picks because that's where it's fun to play with in the mock draft machine. And looking back, there's a little bit more data in terms of like teams trading more within the second round. There aren't a lot of examples in recent years of teams moving from those 2 second round picks and jumping all the way to the first round. There's less of us to kind of look at and get a feel for what the market price is. But there have been a lot more trades of like teams around that range kind of moving within the second round up and down a little bit. The Chicago Bears did this last season when the Bears were picking 52nd and they traded up to the early second round to 39 to take Tevin Jenkins. The Bears gave up their second round pick, the third round pick, and a 6th round pick to go up to 39, and they got a 5th round pick back in exchange, and that was 239, which is where the Chicago Bears are picking this season. So you can sort of do the reverse math there and say, okay, if the Bears had to give up that much to get 39 last year, they have 39. So if they wanted to go down from 39 to 52, what they gave up last year would be the market rate. They could get potentially a 3rd and a 6th back to move down 13 slots, but they gave up a 5th round pick to do it. Bears already have 2 5th round picks, so you could see where that could be potentially a nice way to pick up, still add an extra pick and add an extra top 100 pick with that 3rd round pick, but still leaving you with 2 second round picks, just not picking quite as early. Or you look, I think also last year, the Patriots traded the pick right before where the Bears traded up to. The Patriots traded up 1 slot above where the Bears traded up to. It was the Bengals they were trading with. But the Bengals traded down from 38 to 46. So what is that, 8 slots? And they got 2 4th round picks back in exchange. So it was 46 plus 2 4ths to go up to 38. So if the Bears were going to trade down from 39, you could potentially get 2 4ths if you were going to go down more that 8 pick range. Or the Dolphins moved 8 picks down, or no, the Giants. The teams are not important here. But last year the Giants moved 8 picks down. No, it was the Dolphins. And I'm getting my teams picked. Anyway, from 42 to 50, it took a future 3rd round pick. So the Dolphins gave up 50, like the number 50 pick in the second round, plus a future 3rd round pick to move up 8 slots to number 42. So you can kind of cut it in a couple of different ways. A couple of 4th round picks to move down a little bit, maybe a 3rd and a later round pick, or maybe a future 3rd round pick. Depends on what type of compensation you might be looking for in some of those specific areas. Otherwise, if you want to go like a little bit more a couple of years back, this really seems to be about where the going rate is, right? 2020, the team moved from 59 to 48, so up 11 to go, and they gave up a 3rd round pick, so a 2nd and a 3rd to move up 11. Or the year before that, it was to move up 10 from 47 to 37. They gave up a 3rd round pick. It was a 3rd round pick to go about 10, 11 slots in that mid-second round seems to be where the compensation is. Either a 3rd round pick or potentially, a 4th and a 6th was also done. 42 to 52 was a 4th and a 6th. So that seems to be about where the Bears could be looking at, depending on which pick they're moving down from and how far down they do want to move. Because when you start to get to more like the shorter moves, it tends to be more like just a 4th round pick to move, say, 5 slots. You get a 4th round pick or a 5th and a 6th, right? But more of those like day 3 draft picks if you're moving 4 or 5 picks in the second round. But if you're going like 10 or 12, then you're looking at least a 3rd round pick, maybe plus a little bit something extra, or you could package 2 4th round picks instead. But it's a good way to get another fairly premium draft pick to potentially a top 100 pick if it's in that 3rd round, and still keep your 2nd round pick, just picking them a little bit later. And the Bears have some flexibility there where maybe they stay at 39 and get a guy they feel like is a 1st round talent at 39, but then once you get down to 48, then maybe your board clears up a little bit more and you could jump from 48 to 59 and gain a second, 3rd round pick back. And all of a sudden you have 4 picks total in the top 100, and that allows you to take a wide receiver, an offensive line, a cornerback, and a linebacker. And not that you don't want to draft 4 needs specifically, but all of a sudden it's more slices of the pie here. It's more swings at the home run attempt with these draft picks to fill the positions that you want to fill, because the Bears certainly do have some of those positions that they do want to fill. But it's still a good range to be in terms of movement. It's all about finding then the trade partner that's going to have a player they actually want to move up for. And that's the catch-22 here, right? When if you're the Bears and you're sitting at your spot and saying, you know what, we don't really like, or we like multiple guys at this spot, or we don't really like very many guys at this spot, and we want to trade down and feel like we can get better players there. If you don't like the players at your pick, it would seem to be then less likely that other teams would like the players at your pick. And maybe there's always going to be some team that likes one player enough to want to do it. Of course, like, it's not to say that no one will, that every team thinks exactly the same about all these players, but I just think if it's undesirable to you, it's not going to be instantly, insanely more desirable to every other team that's always going to want to trade for you. Like, I think the dream scenario for the Bears would be that, like, you know, Desmond Ridder or Malik Willis, for some reason, like one of the top quarterbacks, falls all the way to 39. I mean, I'm guessing a team would probably trade above them by then to get a quarterback, but if a quarterback fell and teams came calling, and maybe you could get a little bit of a bidding war and get a little bit extra value in that potential trade down, that would be ideal. It just does seem like 39 might be a little late for the premium quarterbacks to be one where, you know, a team would be willing to give up extra compensation to go up and get them. But we'll see. I have a feeling the Bears will certainly be working the phones one way or another in this NFL draft. And we'll take a look at what the Bears should do, what they could do, what we expect them to do, and how Ryan Poles might go about addressing his roster in this NFL draft next on Locked On Bears. Today's episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars, Built Bars. They really are the best tasting protein bar product I've ever had. I've tried a lot of the different protein bars, the name brand stuff that you can see at all the grocery stores, and you know, some of them are pretty chalky or cardboardy or hard to get down, or they're like loaded up with sugar and sweetener and all this extra crap in there. And it's like, no, I want something that's good for me and good tasting. And Built Bar is the best of both worlds because Built Bars really do taste like candy bars. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're soft. They're easy to chew. But every single flavor of Built Bar is low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. It is an unreal combination that you cannot find anywhere else. And once you taste it for yourself, you will be a believer. Trust me. Head on over to Built.com, enter in our promo code, LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. So if I'm Ryan Poles and I'm going into this draft, it is a tough challenge to balance wanting to add the best players, best young players to really be like these cornerstone foundational type developmental pieces for your roster, right? The long-term pieces that maybe can start early in their career, if not week one, or, you know, make an impact in year one, but then also be guys that continue to get better and be those 10-year players that you tend to have to draft them earlier to have the successful hit rate on where these prospects go, but then also feeling like I want as many draft picks as possible because there are plenty of needs, even just needs for young players in addition to needs for like actual starters on a few different holes still on this roster, that between now and the NFL draft still is time and cap space and free agents to address those holes. So this isn't specifically about specific positions, more as it's like, even if you sign some more players, you'd still like to draft more offensive linemen, more wide receivers, more defensive backs, right? I mean, a lot of these spots that we talked about, like, these are where the Bears, whether you got a free agent brought in or not, get me another rookie in there that I feel like can be more of that long-term building block type piece for this franchise. And so, you know, I don't want to trade down from 39 and miss out on blue chip players and just take a bunch of, you know, good but not great, nothing special but can be okay guys. Because if you build your roster just a bunch of like good but not great players, you're going to have a limited ceiling. Like at some point you need special players, difference makers at their positions. And again, it's a lot easier to get the difference makers the earlier you're picking them in the draft because teams are going to pick the difference makers before you. Right? As soon as every team's going to want them. And so the sooner you can pick them, or the earlier in the draft you pick, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to find them. And we can't yet count on Ryan Poles to have Ryan Pace's skill, luck, talent, evaluation, chops to find gems in the 4th and 5th rounds consistently, right? I mean, that was the one thing you could not knock on Ryan Pace. It was his ability to find Darnell Mooney in the 5th round, Adrian Amos in the 5th round, Eddie Jackson, Tariq Cohen, Jordan Howard in the 4th round, or no, Jordan Howard's in the 5th round too. But regardless, I mean, every year, there's always like one of those 4th or 5th round picks that played way better than they were supposed to based on where they were drafted. And it would seem more likely that Ryan Poles should do better on the earlier picks where Ryan Pace missed too much. And Ryan Poles is probably likely to do worse on the later picks where Ryan Pace somehow was able to pull a rabbit out of his hat very consistently. So then again, the earlier your picks are more of a premium, right? It almost felt like under Pace, you want to do stockpile 5th round picks because he could find them. So it was like, sure, give me 4th and 5th round picks, and I'm not as worried about picking in the 1st and 2nd round because he was missing on them every so often anyway. Whereas with Poles, it's more like, no, get me those 2nd and 3rd round picks, and of course 1st round picks if I could, because I don't trust that I'm going to get playmakers in the 5th and 6th round, and you don't have a 4th round pick this year. And so given the way Ryan Poles has talked about wanting more draft picks and looking for ways to acquire more draft picks, he did say that, I should mention, before trading Khalil Mack for a 2nd round pick. So like since he said that, he has acquired more picks. And so it could be reasonable to say maybe he's acquired enough draft capital that he feels comfortable where he is now, doesn't feel like he needs to trade to get more potential draft picks. But still, without that 4th round pick, I feel like where the Bears sit right now with 2 seconds and a 3rd, and then 75 picks come off the board before they pick again in the 5th round, it feels to me like right now that means the Bears can add 2 probably pretty surefire players, and then in the 3rd round, another player who might be able to be might be able to contribute some as a rookie, but like 3 or 2.5 potential impact players is what the current slate of draft picks would allow me to do. And I can't help but feel tempted, like when we went through the trading down scenarios, and feel like, okay, I could move down, say, 10 slots and add a 3rd round pick potentially, or 2 4th round picks, but especially that 3rd round pick. To me, if moving down 10 spots, especially if you're moving from 48 to like 58, as opposed to like 39 still feels like a spot where like I can probably get a player who I thought was a 1st round pick who fell out of the 1st round. And I'm more tempted to stay at 39 if I can. If the board falls and you're comfortable moving down at 39 because you like kind of all the guys there equally, go ahead. Like whatever. I'm not married to picking early if there's not a guy I feel really tied to picking at that spot. But otherwise, it would feel nice to feel like I can get a 1st round talent at 39. Say if we get lucky and a guy that we feel like is a 1st round pick at 39, boom, get to 48, maybe trade down 10 to 58 or whatever, make up your trade scenario, your partner, and get that team's 3rd round pick, and then pick at 58 and then have 2 3rd round picks and get that 4th top 100 draft pick or top 90 pick with that other 3rd rounder. That to me feels like the ideal balance of, okay, getting a potential blue chip player with that 1st pick, that 2nd round pick, and then I'm getting quantity of still pretty good potential players with a later 2nd round pick and 2/3. And then from there, the 5th round picks and the 6th round picks are just flyers. You take a chance on a guy and you see if Ryan Poles can recreate some of the Ryan Pace magic with a lot of the same coaching or scouting staff in place. So maybe it's the scouting staff and not the general manager. Who knows, right? But I'm not going to count on those 2 5th round picks and that 6th round picks really producing anything for me this season, right? If it does, that's a great bonus, but I'm not going to plan on or account for or, to rely on those draft picks giving me anything right now. So it's really those first 3 picks. And if I can turn those first 3 picks into first 4 picks without completely neutralizing my ability to get impact players, that's what the combination feels like for the right balance of quantity and quality in this draft to give me those 4 potential spots. That feels like enough of an influx of talent. I mean, of course, you want to add as many impact players as you can, but 4 feels like a good number. When you're talking about 4 guys all in the top 90, they're not all going to be blue chip 1st round talent by any means. But if I can get one at 39 and a few other, high quality backups or maybe rotational guys, something like that, a number 4 receiver, maybe somebody who competes to start on the offensive line, maybe a cornerback who competes to start or ends up in the slot as a rookie, or a safety that I feel like can be a long-term prospect, or that number 3 linebacker that might not play as much, or even like a rotational defensive line piece, something like that. I'd feel pretty good about how I'm coming away in the draft. I do think having those 2 2nd round picks is nice flexibility to feel like, okay, I could give up one of those 5ths to move up a couple of slots and still not feel like I'm desperately low on draft picks because who cares about 2 5th-round picks versus 1 5th-round pick. But I'm not under any circumstances. I don't think I'm willing to give up to package both seconds to move up higher in the first. I need those premium top 90 picks, as many of those as I can. I'm not really willing to give up my third to move up. I'm not really willing to give up my other second to move up. And I'm not willing to give up a future draft pick to move up either. That's what you do if you're trying to win now and get that impact player to really help your team right now. I'd give up maybe a future second round pick, but any kind of future day 1 or day 2 pick, I'm not touching. I want if I could gain a future draft pick, that'd be great too. Trade down in the second round, get a third and a future fourth, absolutely. Or whatever kind of future picks you can add, more of that for the long-term team building of this team. Whatever NFL draft trades we see the Bears make, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for your second listen, the Locked On NFL Draft podcast is breaking down all the mock drafts and the prospects you need to know. It's your team every day. Sometimes it's your NFL draft every day. It's your league every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're going to be getting into draft prospects more and more as we get through the rest of the offseason here. But in the meantime, I hope you'll keep tuning in. I hope you'll get all your draft preparation ready to go here as we get excited for the draft and keep an eye on what's happening upcoming in free agency from here through the rest of the offseason. And in exchange, I hope that the Locked On Bears podcast makes it that much easier for you to bear down.